Some people don't disappear because they hate you. They disappear while still caring about you. But their brain convinces them that staying away is the only way to survive. And the scariest part? Most of them don't even realize they're doing it. Today, I'm going to show you the hidden psychology behind why people isolate themselves and why getting them back is harder than you think. Let's call him Leo. A year ago, Leo's life was a symphony. By night, he was a guitarist, his music filling crowded rooms with pure energy and connection. He lived for the stage, for the lights, for that shared pulse with the audience. His life was loud and full of people, but a single traumatic event, a profound betrayal by someone he trusted, shattered his world. And what happened next is something most people completely misunderstand about isolation. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was professional. The stage, once his sanctuary, suddenly felt like a place of terrifying exposure. The music, once his voice, became a painful echo of everything he'd lost. So Leo started to disappear. He didn't make a big announcement, he just faded. His guitar now sits in its case, a coffin for the person he used to be. His retreat into silence wasn't for peace, but for protection. And that's where we're going, not into the quiet peace of solitude, but into the soundless prison of unwanted isolation. To get why someone like Leo locks the door and throws away the key, we have to talk about trauma. Trauma doesn't just hurt you, it rewires how safe the world feels. For many survivors, the world is no longer a basically safe place. Instead, it becomes a landscape of potential threats. Social interaction, which for most of us is a source of joy, can turn into a minefield of triggers. What psychologists tell us is that this withdrawal is a primal defense mechanism. After you've been deeply hurt, the brain's threat detection system goes into overdrive. It starts flagging normal situations and people as dangerous, not because they actually are, but because they feel like they could be. This state is called hypervigilance, where you're constantly scanning for danger in someone's tone of voice, their body language, or just the vibe of a room. Studies show that after trauma, the brain's amygdala becomes overactive, essentially turning your mind into a constant threat detection machine, which means even safe people can feel dangerous. Being around others becomes incredibly overstimulating and just plain exhausting. For a trauma survivor, avoiding people isn't about being antisocial. It's a desperate attempt to avoid the overwhelming anxiety and pain that social situations can trigger. It's a bid for safety. For Leo, this meant that playing music became unbearable. Music demands vulnerability. You have to open your heart to create and to share it. But after his trauma, vulnerability felt like a risk he just couldn't take. The thought of being on stage, exposed, open, was paralyzing. The fear of being judged, of another betrayal, of being seen in his brokenness was too much. His passion, once his greatest strength, was now tied to his deepest wound. And this is common. Trauma can create huge emotional blockages that disconnect artists from the very authenticity they need to create. It's not that the desire is gone, but the emotional price of tapping into it becomes too high. So Leo did what his nervous system was screaming at him to do. He withdrew. He retreated to a place where he couldn't be seen, judged, or heard again. He chose silence, believing it was the only way to survive.
But here's the problem. Protection can slowly turn into a prison. So if isolation hurts, why do people keep choosing it? The answer is a destructive psychological feedback loop. What starts as a shield from trauma often morphs into a self-perpetuating prison of depression and fear. In fact, unwanted isolation is one of the strongest predictors of clinical depression. This isn't just sadness, it's a deep shift in brain chemistry and how you think. And this is where things get dangerous. Here's how the cycle works. The initial isolation cuts you off from positive interactions and support. This breeds loneliness and lets negative thoughts echo and grow louder without anything to challenge them. And the worst part? It feels like the truth. Starved of the social input it needs, the brain starts to default to pessimism and self-criticism. That's the beginning of depression. Then, the depression itself locks the door from the inside. It drains your energy, making picking up the phone feel like lifting a car. It whispers toxic lies in your ear. No one wants to see you. You're just a burden. It's better if you're alone. These feelings of worthlessness make reaching out feel impossible, which just creates more distance. It's a vicious cycle. Isolation deepens depression, and depression demands more isolation. Research shows the brain's stress response during depression often gives you bad information, telling you to shut down when connection is the one thing you need most. This cycle became Leo's reality. The first few weeks of his retreat felt like a relief. The quiet soothed his raw nerves. But soon, that quiet soured and became a heavy, suffocating silence. His thoughts, now his only companions, turned on him. He replayed the trauma over and over, feeding his depressive state. He started believing the lies his depression was spinning. He saw his friends' unanswered texts not as signs of concern, but as proof that he was a bad friend and that they'd be better off without him. His shrinking comfort zone became a noose, tightening every day. He wasn't just alone anymore. He was profoundly lonely, convinced he was unworthy of the very connection he secretly craved. But here's the mistake almost everyone makes. Now, we have to draw a really clear line between two very different ways of being alone: chosen solitude and involuntary isolation, because this is where most people get confused. They might look the same from the outside, but internally, they're worlds apart. Chosen solitude is an act of self-care. It's when you intentionally step away from the world to rest, recharge, and reconnect with yourself. It feels peaceful and restorative. When you're in solitude, you hold the key to the door. You choose when to be alone and when to re-engage. It's a boundary you control. Think of an introvert spending a weekend with a good book to recover from a busy week. That alone time is fulfilling. Involuntary isolation, the state Leo is in, is the opposite. It doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like a sentence. It's being alone because of internal forces like trauma, depression, or crippling anxiety. It isn't peaceful. It feels like a punishment. It's defined by loneliness, disconnection, and a sense of being deprived. Instead of a restorative space, it's a draining one. You're in an empty room, desperate for connection, but trapped behind walls you didn't build and can't seem to climb. This isn't a boundary, it's a barrier. It's the difference between choosing to be in a quiet room and being locked in it against your will. Leo doesn't feel recharged by his silence, he feels drained by it. He isn't experiencing peace, he's experiencing a profound, painful emptiness. From the outside, they look identical, but psychologically, they are opposites. Breaking a cycle this powerful isn't about one big dramatic moment. It's about a small crack of light in a very dark room. For someone trapped in the prison of their own mind, the turning point is often quiet and subtle. It's a flicker of the person they used to be. For Leo, that flicker came from a sound. One afternoon, scrolling aimlessly on his phone, a random video started playing. It was a raw, acoustic performance by some unknown artist. The melody was hauntingly familiar, echoing a chord progression he used to love. For the first time in months, he didn't feel the sting of what he'd lost. Instead, he felt a faint, ghostly echo of the love he once had for music itself. He didn't pick up his guitar that day. That was still too much, the weight of it too heavy. But he did go to the case. He opened it and just looked at the instrument. He ran a hand over the smooth wood, a silent acknowledgement of a part of himself he thought was dead. It didn't look like much, but for him, it was everything. It was a moment of reconnection, not with the world, but with his own lost identity. This is what healing actually looks like. Not dramatic change,
but quiet reconnection. It's not about curing depression or erasing trauma overnight. It's about taking one impossibly small step toward the light. It might be listening to one song. It might be sitting in the sun for 5 minutes. It might be texting a single word back to a friend. For creative people like Leo, healing often means reconnecting with their art in a private, non-performative way, playing a single chord, not for an audience, but just for themselves. These small acts start to challenge the lies of depression. They quietly say, "I'm still here." The journey into involuntary isolation is a slow descent into silence, pushed by the echoes of trauma and sealed by the feedback loop of depression. It's a fortress built for protection that ends up becoming a prison. Leo's story shows us that the person who vanishes from our lives isn't doing it out of anger or indifference. They're doing it out of pain. Their silence isn't a rejection of us, but a symptom of their own deep internal battle. They are fighting to feel safe in a world that has proven it can be dangerous. Understanding this hidden psychology is the first step toward compassion, for others and for ourselves. The path out of isolation isn't a sprint back to how things used to be. It's a slow, gentle walk towards a new normal, one small connection at a time. It's about learning to trust again, starting with yourself. It's about finding the courage to open the door, even just a crack, and let a single sliver of light in. If you recognize yourself or someone you love in this story, remember this: you are not broken. You adapted to survive something painful, and your story isn't over yet. If this made you understand someone in your life, or even yourself, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt this way? Because sometimes the first step out of isolation is realizing you're not the only one in it.